Salve, salve quebrada, mais um dia aí de quebra dev de Brasil JS. Lembrar todo mundo aí, a gente vai começar daqui 5 minutinhos já. Lembrar do código de conduta, respeito tanto na live quanto quem tá aqui pessoalmente, tá? Vocês podem usar a mesma hashtag de ontem, BrasilJS19, twitta lá, faz perguntas pros palestrantes também, a gente vai entrevistar alguns hoje aqui, tentar trazer alguns de ontem também, então se ficar alguma dúvida pode trazer no Twitter, pode comentar na live também.
E pode dizer aí qual palestrante tu quer ver que a gente tenta...
Verdade,
qual palestrante,
verdade.
eu quero uma entrevista com palestrante A ou B. A gente tenta trazer ele aqui, não
Sim.
prometemos nada, mas tentamos trazer, né? E lembrar que o código de conduta vale também para as redes sociais, a gente tem uma equipe que está aqui cuidando das nossas redes sociais, dos comentários da live, então quem for desrespeitoso a gente vai tomar providências, né? Ser cortado. E a gente já tá ansioso aqui para a primeira palestra, né?
Está. Como é que você tá, Miguel? Tá ansiosa?
Tô ansiosa, tô levemente ansiosa. Eu acho que esse é um sentimento mútuo de todo mundo aqui e também dos palestrantes. A gente sabe que é um evento muito grande, tem diversas pessoas assistindo, então acho bem importante, assim, ter essa ansiedade até pra acabar dando uma guinada mesmo no dia e tal, levantando um astral.
Agora a gente está ouvindo aqui, talvez vocês não ouçam e vocês infelizmente não vão poder ver, mas já está rolando o vídeo de abertura, que é um vídeo sensacional, tipo, ficou muito bom mesmo. Sim. Estilo do ano passado, emocionante.
Nossa, tá muito
então,
bom.
significa que daqui a pouco já está começando o vídeo de abertura para a galera já ir se sentando. Então vocês já podem ir pegando o cafezinho, o chá, o chimarrão, seja lá, sentar aí, que daqui a pouco já vai começar a primeira palestra do dia.
Exatamente. A galera aqui já tá chegando em peso, tem bastante gente aqui descendo as escadas, a gente pode ver aqui. Logo mais tá todo mundo já assistindo e acho que é isso aí, né? Todo mundo acompanhar. Já vai tentar acompanhar hoje também, nem que seja pela live.
Exato.
É isso aí, né?
E a primeira palestra é a da Mina, né? Da Mina Marca, que é uma software engineer lá do Slack. Né? Tipo, uma mina. A Mina é uma mina muito famosa.
A mina é uma mina. Boa.
E é uma palestra que é muito legal, assim, ela vai falar sobre direção de arte na web. Então, tipo, a gente tem tido várias palestras que trazem coisas não técnicas para o mundo técnico, né? Ontem a gente teve a do MPJ mesmo, que não teve nada de código, mas foi muito bacana. A gente teve a palestra sobre games, né?
Sim. Teve a palestra também da Drift falando sobre
realidade
virtual para todos e tal. Mais uma questão de conceito do que
teve a palestra do
técnicas.
Digão também, que falou sobre questão do JavaScript e também do trabalho dele no Tecnogueto, que é super importante lá no Rio de Janeiro.
E é bem legal, assim, que às vezes as pessoas têm uma noção e acham que o JavaScript é só para web, né? E a gente viu aqui realidade virtual, a gente viu games, a gente vai ver outras coisas, assim, tipo, que são fora da caixa web, sabe?
Sim.
Pode fazer muitas coisas. E nas outras edições também a gente teve o Gui falando sobre um braço robótico feito com JavaScript, sabe?
O JavaScript está em todos os
lugares,
lugares,
em todos os lugares.
O Kenneth ontem também falou sobre o Project Fugo e aí ele mostrou algumas APIs para você trabalhar em diversos, até para usar em controles e enfim, diversos locais para usar na web também. Então é bem legal como o JavaScript está difundido em vários locais. Assim.
A gente pode usar para machine learning, a gente pode usar para inteligência artificial, enfim, tem diversas aplicações. Então, deixou há muito tempo de ser uma linguagem web, né? Isso é muito bacana de ver, né?
Sim,
inclusive, do machine learning teve o workshop do MPJ, né?
O workshop do MPJ, que a gente teve 2 turmas lotadas do workshop. Então, cara, sensacional, né?
Bem massa. Hoje a gente vai ter também palestra sobre TypeScript. A gente entrevistou
o
Horta ontem. Ele deixou uns botões com a gente, deixou uns adesivos. Se você tá vendo a live e tá aqui no evento, você pode chegar nele e pedir os botões, que ele tava com uma bolsa enorme, cheia de botões e adesivo. Ele quer entregar mesmo. Então se estiver aqui, corre nele e pede. Ele tá aberto pra entregar.
Eu vou ter que pedir desculpa, mas já vai começar a palestra aqui, então bora pra palestra e daqui a pouco a gente aparece aqui de novo.
A gente volta depois. É isso?
ter vocês aqui. Queria anunciar também para vocês que nós temos canecas novas que chegaram ali, acabaram ontem umas, mas já tem novas que chegaram. E a gente tem que lembrar também sobre os álbuns. Então a nossa ideia é que vocês literalmente troquem figurinhas entre vocês, né? Quem tiver figurinha repetida aí, tenta achar alguém para trocar com vocês. E a gente tem algumas figurinhas a mais também na loja ali, quem quiser, para tentar completar esse álbum aí que tá bem legal. E vai ter premiação também para quem conseguir completar o álbum. Então quem completar o álbum, leva ali na loja para apresentar, que depois vai ter um sorteio entre todos que completaram o álbum.
Tá bom? E, bom, vocês já entenderam a dinâmica dos apresentadores, apresentadoras, né, hosts, e a gente tem, então, agora pela manhã, mais uma pessoa. Eu vou chamar aqui no palco a nossa grande amiga, Alda Rocha. Muitas palmas para a Alda. É contigo, Alda.
Obrigada. Olá! Nossa, vocês estão lindos vistos daqui. Que bom vê-los. Primeiro, queria agradecer de verdade mesmo, tá? Por estarem aqui mais uma vez presenciando o que é a maior conferência de JavaScript do planeta. Sei que tinha muita gente falando do universo, mas do planeta, tá? Sem delongas, eu acho que a gente já pode começar. Então, vamos chamar nossa primeira palestrante, que é a Mina Markham.
How you jumping if finesse? Don't they make no sense? How you jumping if finesse? You know this, you know it. How you jumping if finesse? Don't they make no sense? How you dropping if finesse? You know this, you know it.
Thank you. I love that song. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here at Brazil.js. I'm going to talk to you about full-featured art direction. I came here from San Francisco, California. It was about a 20-hour trip, so I'm a little tired, but I'm very excited to be here. So when I first got invited to this event, I realized it was, Brazil.js, the biggest freaking JavaScript conference in the universe. But I was thinking, I'm not Brazilian. I don't speak Portuguese, and I'm not going to talk about JS. Am I in the right place? No. Anyway, thank you all so much for having me. Just said my name is Mina Markham. You can find me on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle, and my website is mina.codes. So this talk is informed by a couple of jobs I've had in the past. The one that I'm probably most well known for is I worked for Hillary Clinton in 2016 when she was trying to become the president of the United States. I tried, I'm sorry. But now I currently work at Slack, which is this great enterprise chat software that I hope most of you know of and use, but I don't work on the Slack app, that app that you see the client. That's not actually me. What I do is I work on Slack.com. I work on our marketing materials and marketing properties, so everything you see before you log in, that will be the work that I do. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about something I call full-feature art direction. So what exactly is art direction? Dan Mall, who's a friend of mine, a great designer, he says that art direction combines art and design to invoke a cultural and emotional reaction. So essentially, if design is the how we get there, art direction is the why we got there. It boils down to, does what we're making feel good? Does it feel good to whoever the target audience is? So for the purposes of this talk, art direction is a progressively enhanced default experience. It's localized by culture, and it's powered by design systems. So let's get into it. Okay, so art direction is progressive. Now, so often we are creating our applications, our websites, our designs for the best possible use case. We assume, a desktop design with Retina display and lightning fast internet. At least we do in California because we're Americans and we're self-centered. But what we should do is we should create something for the lowest common use case, or something that the entire, pretty much everyone in the world could enjoy. I've been calling this the minimum viable design or minimum viable experience. Rachel Andrew, who is also, she's a great CSS advocate. She is one of the people who's been pushing CSS Grid to the forefront. She says that she builds websites that have to work everywhere in as many places as possible, but look the same? No, that's not possible. In essence, your designs looking different in different browsers is not necessarily a bug. It's more of a feature of how CSS and browsers work. Going to what my friend Andy Bell here says is that we need a complete mindset change, and it starts by remembering that you don't build websites for yourself, you build them for others. With progressive enhancement, every user should have their own experience of the site rather than the experience that we as designers and developers demand of them. In essence, we need to have a better default experience for everyone. I liken this to cake, to baking cakes. So if you think of a cake as three main pieces, there's the HTML, which is the chunk of it. There's the CSS, which is the frosting or the icing and the styling. And then there's the JavaScript part on top of it, which gives you the sprinkles and the cherries and really, all the good stuff. All of that is one big web experience. But, there are people out there who just want the cake. Like, they scrape off everything and just eat the cake. And if you go that route, you still have cake, which is great. But if you add everything on top of it, then you get a great experience. So, and the way that translates to building web apps and web products is that I build things going markup first. So what I mean by that is when I get designs from my design team, I see them the same way that Neo sees the Matrix. So I look at this, and when I see a design, what I see actually is this. It's like, okay, this would be a header and an H1. Here's all of our our headers. Here's all of the, it should be anchor tagged because that entire block should be clickable and take you somewhere else. So I kind of see everything for their semantic value and for what their purpose is first before I look at all the styling. And when I go through that first pass of markup first, the site ends up looking a bit like this, which granted is boring, but if all else fails, if there's some catastrophic failure of CSS or JavaScript loading, people can still see what they came there to see. It might not look pretty, it might not be the best thing, but at least they get their content. So I'm at a JavaScript conference, and I'm telling you to ignore JavaScript, which is, please don't kick me off the stage. What you're probably thinking is, who disables JavaScript anymore? Like, people don't do that. And what I mean by default experience, I don't necessarily mean no JavaScript. I just mean that in order to enjoy the experience, they shouldn't depend entirely on JavaScript. So essentially what I'm saying is, like, sometimes people don't disable JavaScript. Sometimes it just something bad happens and they don't get it. For example, for whatever reason, it fails to load, or there's a runtime error, or because we never ship bugs to productions. But if you did, sometimes there's an error and you may not load. They may have an ad blocker enabled, which means that they may block JavaScript running on the page to block ads from loading. Or if you're like me and tend to travel a lot, sometimes you just find yourself on a really slow network and things just don't load the way you want them to. But if you build something progressively, what that means is that you're just avoiding, it means to avoid trying to find a bunch of polyfills and a bunch of fixes to support older browsers. It simply means that if something is not working or something is supported, you should find a simpler method to do the same thing. A great example of this is a site called mybrowser.fyi. And if everything works properly and every feature is supported, it looks like this. What this site does is, if you visit it, it will tell you all the capabilities of the browser and operating system you happen to be viewing it on. So it will show you whether or not you support cookies, you support JavaScript, what the viewport is, all kinds of nice information. This is the best possible experience. If one thing isn't working, it goes to a more, not the great experience, just a slightly different experience where it's no longer a pretty rendering of the same information. Instead, you get a JSON blob, which you get the exact same information, exact same content. It just doesn't necessarily look the exact same way. And if all else fails and something really bad happens, you can actually just submit a form and it'll send you back the information. So I like this because it's an example of a nice tiered experience, and it doesn't always assume that you have the best possible technology available to you. Okay, but come on though, is this really still an issue? You know, apparently. I went looking for what some award-winning websites to see what some of the, what we as a community really love, sites that we really love and celebrate. And I found this one called The History of Web.Design, which is like it says, it goes through a timeline of the history of web design. And it starts back in the 1990s and kind of goes up until present day, and it has this really beautiful interactive experience, this interactive timeline. So I thought, just for fun, what would happen if I said I didn't have JavaScript available? We're sorry, the history of web design doesn't work properly without JavaScript enabled. Please enable to continue it. Now, I looked through this website, and essentially all it really is images and text describing the images. There's no real reason you have to have JavaScript to see this experience. Granted, it makes it a much better, more interactive experience, but there could have been a more graceful and elegant way to serve the same content to people who didn't have that JavaScript enabled. Okay, so I want to get into the meat of my talk, which is localization and how it applies to art direction. So as I said, I work at Slack, and Slack is localized in a lot of different languages. Here is the front page that I built, I'm very proud of, yay me. So here's the front page of slack.com, and here's all the different languages you can view slack.com in, languages and regions. Now, of course, the US English is a default because we are a US-based company, but we also have localization for Brazil and Portuguese, Latin America and Espanol, Germany, Spain, French, United Kingdom, India, and Japan. And so I have to, whenever I build something for our site, I have to keep in mind that it also will be localized and translated into all of these different regions and languages. And so the first time I encountered this was, we have these representations of the Slack product on the website, these abstract renderings of what the experience of using Slack is like. And so here's what one looks like when we first launched. When I got there, it was just US English only, and was one thing. When we localized for the first round of languages, which included Japan, we ended up looking a bit like that, where we just translated all of the strings, all of the words, into Japanese. And we thought that we did a pretty good job. That looks pretty good. It wasn't until one of our Japanese interpreters came to us and said, no, this is weird. This is not a great experience. And we couldn't figure out why what was wrong with it and what they were talking about. And it wasn't until they pointed out that showing Western-looking faces, having a conversation in Japanese is a very, very strange experience, and it's not something that our Japanese users would actually appreciate. And so we realized what we were doing was we were strictly translating, but we weren't localizing properly. And the difference between the two was that translation is simply translating words. Those of you who do not speak English and are listening to the interpreter, he is translating for me right now. Localization would be more of changing not just the words, but the context in which they live, so it's more appropriate to the regional audience you're trying to do, or you're trying to target. So, in absence of us having actual Japanese people to show in our product UIs, what we ended up doing was we swapped out all of the Western faces for these colored blocks to simulate a conversation until we could get better and find Japanese models and have a real localized experience. We did the same thing for all of our illustrations. So you can see we have a darker skinned brown person as illustrated on the screen there. But when you looked at it in Japan, we changed the illustration so it was a more light skinned person to represent the Japanese culture. So about a year later, we actually finally have these fully localized product UIs that show regionally appropriate names and faces. If you happen to go to slack.com, my face is one of the fake people having a conversation that you see on the site. I'm not me always, though. Sometimes, depending on the country you're in, I become different people. So I'll illustrate this. If you view it in US in English, you see my face with the fake name that I made up, Zoe Maxwell. If you look at it here in Brazil and in Portuguese, it's still my face, but my name becomes something that's a little bit more appropriate to the Portuguese language and the Brazilian people. If you look at it in Germany, my face becomes someone completely different and my name becomes different. Same thing with India. My face and name change. And Japan, my face and name change. That's all still represented by the same variable at the very top there, that avatar or persona A. That's the variable that's actually in the code base. But depending on the geolocation and the settings that a user has, we swap out what that actually represents to be more regionally appropriate. And in essence, we pay more attention to the context that you're viewing the site in. Context comes into play a lot when we're talking about localization and translation. Here are some messages that I frequently get from our localization team asking me for more context behind the words, the strings that I've sent them for translation. They want to know how these words are used, what the whole picture, they want to picture the whole of it so they can properly interpret and properly translate what's going on there. So our localization manager at Slack, she essentially says that the witty remarks we make and the references to a familiar idiom, these are kind of thoughtful things that they're extra thoughtful about when trying to build trust with global users. The end goal is to make it so that no matter where a user is in the world, they feel like the product originated in their country. And that's what we're trying to do. We don't want it to seem like we just shoved Portuguese words into an American experience. We want to make sure that it feels more specific to the region, to the country that we're actually operating in. In essence, context is everything. So when I started thinking about how thoughtful they are about what words they use when they're translating and when they're interpreting the marketing of our site, I started thinking about, well, how can we be more intentional when we're talking about the visuals on the site? So I started looking at how other companies localize. Apple essentially uses the same website, but they swap out images depending on where they are. For someone like Coca-Cola tends to create an entirely new website based on the region that they're in. So in Japan, or is that China? I'm so sorry. I believe that is. Actually, I'm not sure if that's Japanese or Chinese. My bad, I can't read it. But essentially, it swaps out an entirely different experience, not even the same website. I would probably guess it's ran by a different team that's located in that country as well. So then I started looking at other sites. I was targeting Japanese in Japan at the time because it was the culture I was the least familiar with. So I was looking at what popular websites look like there. And so here's one. And here's another one that's probably an e-commerce or a business site. Here's another one that is a news site. And I remember looking at this and thinking, ooh, why do they all look so dense? Why are they all this doesn't look like great design to me. And then I stopped to think about how arrogant of me that was, because I'm not used to what these designs look like. It doesn't mean that they're bad, it just means that they're different. My friend Amelie Lamont, who's a great designer who used to work for the New York Times, she calls this something like the hegemonic design gaze. And essentially what that means is that the way that Westerners, at least, tend to look at design is through a very specific Western cultural lens, and we don't think about the regional implications or utility for these same designs. And so we end up thinking that anything that doesn't look like Western design is bad, which is, again, a very kind of arrogant way to look at the world. One of my friends, Yi Lu, is really good at bringing in the the local cultural context into designs that she creates. So a few years ago, she was asked to create designs for the Disney resort in Shanghai, China. Disney being a very iconic Western organization and business, they wanted to make sure that what they were creating in China, they wanted to attract Chinese workers to work at the resort, to work at Disney. So they wanted to make it so it felt like Disney, but it felt very distinctly Chinese. And so she was asked to take some iconic Disney characters like Mickey Mouse and Snow White and Elsa. She was asked to take these characters and make them appeal to Chinese viewers, to Chinese, potential Chinese workers, so to speak. And so what she did was, she said to make it authentically Disney and uniquely Chinese, she created them in the traditional Chinese paper cut style. So what that means is there's this style of design, this style of creation that is very specific to the Chinese people, where they take the paper and they cut them in these very intricate design patterns, these very intricate details, and it's a tradition that is probably kind of dying out for the more modern generation, but it's something that anyone who is Chinese or who knows Chinese culture would immediately recognize as very specific to them. So she would take those and she applied them to the Disney characters in a way that made it still feel like Disney, but it felt very distinctly Chinese as well. And it was a very successful campaign. They were able to recruit thousands and thousands of workers to come work at the Shanghai resort, which is exactly what Disney needed. So the way that she describes it is, the target market's local customs should be recognized, respected, and infused in the design. Excuse me? So when I thought about this, I tried to figure out how I could apply it to the work I do at Slack. I took this article that exists, it was translated from English to Japanese. It's about how we are localizing our product. And I wanted to see how can I do this and take it, how can I do this and make it feel more Japanese and apply better to the Japanese culture? So first I went and I looked at a bunch of designs that were featured in Japan to see how they were doing that. And so I saw this big red circle was featured a lot, so I decided to try to take that red circle and infuse it into the existing design. The way I did that was by using the Lang attribute. Lang is this pseudo class in CSS that allows you to change your CSS based on language. So I applied a bunch of styles. First, I changed the font family. I applied some specific CSS grid and writing mode features to it to kind of move around the layout a bit to see how I can play with it. And it ended up looking like this, which, is pretty good. What I didn't like was the way that red circle clashed with the main imagery. So I added a little bit of extra filtering on top to change how the image looked so it looked a little bit better for the Japanese people. And the way that ended up looking is a bit like this, which it's pretty good. It definitely feels different from what the English experience looks like, but it still wasn't enough for me. I added just a little bit of sprinkle on top, and I made it so that the red circle sort of simulated like a beating, heart of Japan, which, granted, is not really all that important to the experience. It's just me playing around. So I decided to go ahead and hide that behind a feature query so that if someone doesn't want to see animation, they wouldn't see that particular part of it. Okay, so my last thing, I have to go through this last part quickly because I'm running out of time. My last part here is art direction is systematic, which essentially means art direction is powered by design systems. So a design system is a lot of things. Lots of words are associated with design systems. Don't try to read them all. Basically, it just says there's components, or it's written in React, or there's patterns, there's a style guide. It's a lot of different things that are included in design system. But the way I think about them is design systems are, at its foundation, just a set of rules. You make up what those rules are, and more importantly, you can break them when you feel the need to. So a design system has all of these things combined, but we tend to focus solely on what the components are, which I think are a mistake. I think we should focus on the whole of what a design system is. One part being the visual language of what a brand is. So I started thinking, is it possible to have a visual language per locale or per country? This place called the Public Theater in New York City has a pretty good use case for this. The creative director here, Paula Scheer, she says that the Public Theater is a theater that has a bunch of different shows, like 6 or 7 shows every single year, and it has a very distinct visual brand attached to it. But if you make it look the same over and over every year, it tends to start getting a little bit boring. It tends to start looking very, very static. But if you changed it for every single show, if every show had its own distinct feel, then the theater as a whole would lose what its visual identity is. So here's an example of changing it for every single show, which they all look very distinct and beautiful, but you don't really get a sense of the overall theater as a whole. That sounded very familiar to me about design systems. And so what she decided to do was she would take the color system and typography from every year and translate it into a yearly standards manual. In a sense, the theater would get a new identity every single year. What she was doing was she was changing the visual language per year. So the way that that kind of translates, the way that that pans out was if you take this visual language, these are all different plays and events from the same year, but if you broke that down into a design system or a style guide, it would tend to look a bit like this. So you can see how these would apply for this could apply as a design system for one specific year in her case, or in maybe my case, that could be a design system for one country. If I go to the next year, the system looks completely different. This is the same theater, and these are all events happening that same year. If I switch that out, then you could say maybe the next year or the next language or the next country gets a completely different imagery and typography set. So in conclusion, I wanted to say that the way that I think about art direction as it applies to the web is that art direction is progressively enhanced default experiences that are localized by our culture, the cultural context they live in, and that they are powered by design systems. And with that, I want to say, thank you very much for having me.
Esse é o Super Guilherme. Bom, de dia é só Guilherme mesmo. Especialista em servidores. O cara mais fera em VPS da cidade. Talvez até do país, ou melhor, da América Latina. Rápido como uma flecha, ele já salvou a empresa de muita gente. Desde a mega agência até a lojinha do seu Joaquim ali na esquina. Site caindo? Resolvido. Aplicação lenta? Resolvido. Campanha de disparo de milhares de e-mails? Resolvido. Derrotar o vilão da cidade em uma batalha na ponte? Resolvido. Mas bem, quais superpoderes são precisos para fazer tudo isso? A arma secreta dele, na verdade, são os novos servidores VPS da HostGator, com recursos dedicados que garantem a máxima performance. Aí fica fácil salvar o dia.
Então, pessoal, estamos de volta aqui. Agora é o nosso momento de coffee. A gente vai ter algumas entrevistas, a gente vai ter patrocinador falando, a gente vai falar aqui com os fundadores da BSJS também.
Os criadores de todo esse evento maravilhoso que está acontecendo aqui. E vai ser demais. Para vocês que estão aí nos assistindo, pega aquele café, aproveita que está rolando o coffee break e acompanha as entrevistas, a fala do patrocinador, que vai ser interessantíssimo aqui.
E vamos lembrar da hashtag BrasilJS19, né? Vamos subir para os Trending Topics de novo. Ontem a gente ficou nos Trending Topics. Vamos subir hoje de novo para os Trending Topics. Então, Twitter aí, posta foto de onde que tu está assistindo. Fala, pergunta, dúvidas para os palestrantes. Diz quem tu quer que a gente entreviste, que a gente vai tentar conseguir essa entrevista. Então, vai interagindo aí com a gente e a gente vai respondendo, fazendo o possível aqui na live.
Sim, e quem tiver dúvida, a gente falou ontem, tiver dúvida de palestra, tiver alguma dúvida, tiver salve para mandar aí, a gente está aqui online, eu vendo todos os comentários e a gente vai acompanhando aqui, avisando vocês. E é bom lembrar também do código de conduta, né? Nunca esquecer que a gente tem, o Brasil JS tem um código de conduta que é basicamente respeite os amiguinhos, respeite as diferenças que todos nós temos, seremos capazes de discernir a informação e acessá-la.
O mais
né?
importante é a gente ter respeito, né? Vamos respeitar as pessoas, isso é o que o nosso código de conduta traz. E agora a gente vai ter uma entrevista do Bruno, da Pipefy, que é do On The Road Curitiba, que vai acontecer agora em breve, né? Então a gente vai falar um pouquinho sobre o On The Road, pode vir aqui.
Seja bem-vindo.
Oi, gente, tudo bem?
Beleza?
Tudo bem?
Tudo jóia.
Então, Bruno, qual é a tua expectativa para o On The Road?
Cara, eu estou muito animado, vai ser muito legal. A gente está com uma grade de palestras bem legal e eu acho muito legal essa iniciativa da Brasil.js de levar esse evento para outras cidades que normalmente não tem muito evento de tecnologia, não tem grandes eventos, como por exemplo a gente está tendo aqui na Brasil.js. Tem um pedacinho, uma experiência da Brasil.js na nossa cidade é muito legal, estou super animado. Acho que vai ser um dia bem legal aí para a comunidade de Curitiba.
E fala um pouquinho assim para o pessoal que está interessado em talvez levar On The Road para sua cidade, não tem uma ideia de como é que é trabalhar na organização. Conta um pouquinho da tua experiência de como é trabalhar na organização do On The Road Curitiba, quais as dificuldades, enfim, tuas impressões sobre isso.
Legal. Só para contar antes, eu participei a primeira vez do On The Road em Brasília, e aí eu olhei aquele negócio e falei, nossa, que negócio legal, a gente tem que fazer em Curitiba. E aí o Jadson, a gente cruzou na hora do almoço e ele falou, não, vamos levar para Curitiba. Eu falei, cara, vamos, eu não faço a menor ideia como é que a gente vai fazer, mas vamos. E eles super me apoiaram, a gente conversou, tenho falado com o Andrés aí constantemente para a gente organizar. O pessoal da Brasil.js ajuda pra caramba. Do nosso lado lá de Curitiba, basicamente o que a gente tem que fazer é a relação com os fornecedores locais, então procurar um lugar, ver coffee,